On behalf of the Ohio Aerospace Institute, 6th Annual NASA Glenn Evening with the Stars. This event is designed to bring forward to the entire community a new understanding of the cutting-edge research and technology development taking place every day at the NASA Glenn Research Center. These dedicated men and women create breakthrough in technology that affect each other and every one of us in our daily lives, and will enable human beings not only to be better stewards of our own planet, but to explore our solar system and our universe. To carry out this great work, the NASA Glenn Research Center needs continued support from our community. This support demonstrated by the many generous sponsors of this evening's event, whose logos you saw displayed this evening and who are also listed in this evening's program. To our sponsors, thank you for your commitment to supporting the NASA Glenn Research Center and getting the message out to the community about this tremendous research asset to our community and our nation. Please give all of our sponsors a round of applause. At the same time, I want to thanks to the NASA Planning Committee for picking this fine facility, the History Museum, and what a great venue for all of us to get together at. It's also important that NASA Glenn Research Center have support from our dedicated public officials. We are fortunate to have elected officials at the local, state, and national level who care deeply about the center's future. Thank you to our public officials for taking time to be with us this evening. United States Congressman Tim Ross, Ohio House of Representative members Bride Rose Sweeney, Kent Smith, Diane Grendel, Michael Skindell, Ohio Department of Transportation Director Jack Marchbanks, Ohio Senior Advisor for Aerospace and Defense, retired Colonel Joseph Zeese Jr., and Cuyahoga County Councilwoman Cheryl Stevens. Please join me in giving our public officials a warm welcome. Thank you. Ohio Aerospace Institute places a tremendous value on partnership with the NASA Glenn Research Center, a partnership that has extended for more than 30 years. Tonight, I congratulate Center Director Dr. Janet Cavandi and her entire team for the outstanding work that they do. We are proud to be part of the NASA Glenn community. Our NASA colleagues represent so much of what is truly great about our nation: courage, dedication, perseverance, brilliant ideas and solutions. In a few moments, you will hear from some of the brightest stars of the NASA Glenn Research Center, working every day to better life on Earth and enhance our understanding of the universe. And now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Janet Cavandi, Director of the NASA Glenn Research Center, who has logged more than 33 days in space, traveling more than 13.1 million miles and 535 Earth orbits, and whose outstanding leadership continues to take Glenn Research Center to new heights and achievements. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Cavandi.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Evening with the Stars. This is our first time here in the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, and I can't think of a more appropriate place for our discussion about how NASA Glenn is powering the future of flight innovation and space exploration as we're ready to embark on the next era of humankind. Before we get started tonight, I must also thank Sonia Winter and her entire staff here at the Natural History Museum. We truly appreciate you opening your doors to us and for your support in helping us to organize and plan this event. So one more time, please give them a round of applause. I would also like to recognize John Sankovic and John Kopman and their team at the Ohio Aerospace Institute. None of this would be possible without their support and their coordination. So Ohio is a leader in aerospace, and it's due in great part to their collaboration and our partnership with OAI. And I must also thank our NASA Glenn staffers who have gone above and beyond to ensure that this event is fresh and engaging year after year. Your dedication on behalf of the center is truly appreciated. And finally, I want to give a shout out to NASA Glenn's former center director, Mr. Jim Free, who really loves a lot of attention, so I'd love for him to stand up and be recognized. I owed him for that, so that's a good one. Evening with the Stars is always special for NASA Glenn, as it affords us the opportunity to inform our key stakeholders and partners in the Cleveland area about the work that we're doing. Today, NASA is embarking on Artemis, which is America's next era of space exploration. Named after Apollo's twin sister, Artemis will see the first woman and the next man step foot on the moon by the year 2024. It will reaffirm the United States as the global leader in space exploration, while also serving as a proving ground for the technologies that we need to get to Mars. Before we get on to tonight's presentations on how Glenn is contributing to our collective future, I want to introduce a key member of our NASA leadership team charged with leading us into the next phase of human exploration and technological innovation here on Earth. Melanie Saunders became NASA's Deputy Associate Administrator in June of 2018, first serving in an acting capacity before taking on her role full-time this past October. As one of the senior civil servants in the agency, her duties include assisting Administrator Bridenstine and other senior leaders in implementing all aspects of the agency's functions, policy, and integration of programs. She also chairs the NASA Mission Support Council, which serves as a senior decision-making body regarding the agency's mission support portfolio. Prior to moving to NASA headquarters, Melanie served in leadership roles at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, including roles as acting deputy center director and associate center director, where she oversaw a broad range of human spaceflight activities, a workforce of nearly 11,000 people, and an annual budget of approximately $5 billion. She holds a bachelor's degree in history from the University of California, Santa Barbara, her law degree from the University of California, Davis, and she is a member of both the California and Florida Bar Associations. So please help me in welcoming Melanie to the stage.
All right, well, good evening. Thank you, Janet, for that warm welcome. So I am so fortunate to be here in Cleveland in this lovely museum with all of you. Looking forward to hearing about the amazing research of our colleagues at Glenn, enjoying the lovely Chamber of Commerce weather you rolled out for us today. Is just superb. I spent a lot of time in Houston and other places, and it's considerably less comfortable than it is here, so thanks for that. I send regards on behalf of NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine. He would love to be here. This happens to be the week that we're presenting our budget to the Office of Management and Budget, appropriately enough. And if you've ever heard anything about that process, you'll know that I certainly got the good end of this deal. So I'm really thrilled to be here for many reasons, not just the wonderful program that awaits us. So we're so proud of our colleagues here at Glenn. Janet and her team have just done an amazing job pushing the forefront and the frontiers in technology, aeronautics, exploration, and technology research. So thrilled to be here. Had a great day spending quality time with a lot of my colleagues here at Glenn, learning more about their work. So looking forward to hearing more about it tonight. So thank you. I'm so fortunate to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Melanie. We're so happy that you could be with us here tonight. And as we've been discussing, Artemis is our next giant leap of exploration and discovery. Returning to the moon isn't going to be easy, and that is why NASA needs Glenn and Ohio. None of this would be possible without the expertise and contributions provided by NASA Glenn and the hundreds of Ohio-based aerospace companies. And tonight you will learn more about two key areas in which Glenn is playing a leading role in Artemis. A key piece of our plans for lunar exploration start in orbit around the moon with the Gateway. It is our agile orbiting outpost, which is essential for surface expeditions and scientific research. And Melissa McGuire is here to discuss how one of Glenn's major contributions, the power and propulsion element, will provide our explorers with more access to more parts of the moon than ever before. As we explore the moon's surface and eventually travel further into our solar system, there will come a point where carrying all of the required supplies with us becomes cost prohibitive and overly hazardous. So Diane Linney is here to help us learn about how NASA's working to develop hardware and systems to extract and cultivate local resources, which can then be used to generate products like breathable oxygen, drinkable water, and even rocket propellant in a practice called in situ resource utilization. The technologies we'll discuss tonight will support Artemis on the moon, but our horizon goal remains the exploration of Mars, and NASA Glenn will be there too. And while all of this is happening away from the Earth, our researchers are continuing to refine technologies aimed at making today's commercial aircraft safer, quieter, and more efficient, while pioneering the next generation of cutting-edge subsonic, supersonic, and hypersonic aircraft. A key member of NASA Glenn's aeronautics research team, David Avanesian, is going to talk with us about how we're ushering in the next major aviation renaissance, one where we'll be flying in hybrid electric and even all-electric aircraft, and how that work is leading to tremendous advancements, not only in aerospace, but in the electronics we use every day. So once again, I thank you all for joining us here tonight, and I hope you are as excited as I am to hear what Melissa, Diane, and David have to say. And without further ado, let's start the show with the contributions taking place here on Earth by welcoming David to the stage.
On December 17, 1903, two brothers from Dayton, Ohio, would alter human history forever. On that day, Wilbur and Orville Wright flew their wooden and canvas machine off the sandy dunes in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, becoming the first to flight. Heavy experimentations with gliders, like advancements in engine technologies, controls, and aerodynamics, provided a pathway for heavier-than-air crafts, like the Wright brothers' Flyer. By the 1930s, airships, which have dominated the long-distance flight, were replaced by flying boats and other rudimentary aircraft. By the 1930s and 40s, development of aircraft for war effort greatly accelerated infusion of new technologies into civilian general aviation. This stream of innovation led to the start of the jet age, which would revolutionize both general and military aviation. Later in 20th century, even more advanced technologies like digital electronics would bring about fly-by-wire, digital engine controls, GPS, and these advancements even changed the way we go about designing aircraft. This century has been marked by transitioning to large-scale pilotless drones, and for the first time ever, inherently unstable aircraft, such as highly integrated flying wings, have become a possibility. And with all these advancements in the past 112 years, we're still only scratching the surface of capability and performance, but we're paying a heavy price for lagging innovation. Who here has traveled by air in the past 6 months? Were you surprised by the cost and time of your trip? Today we find ourselves at the doorstep of yet another revolutionary advancement in aviation history: electric or hybrid electric aircrafts. NASA is investing in electrified aircraft propulsion research, or EAP, as part of its portfolio to improve fuel efficiency, emissions, and noise levels in commercial transport aircrafts. EAP uses electric motors to drive some or all of the engines on an aircraft. The energy source for the system can be electric, hybrid, or turboelectric. NASA is working across a range of markets, from urban air mobility to subsonic transport. Each market has differences in vehicle size, range, and speeds. Our strategy at NASA is to work with our industry partners to enable technology development, demonstrate these technologies in flight, and transfer the knowledge to commercial sector for future products and markets. One such emerging market is urban air mobility, developed through NASA's Revolutionary Vertical Lift Technology project. Urban air mobility, or UAM, is a conceptual market that would enable passenger-carrying air transportation in and around metropolitan areas. Think of flying Ubers. These vehicles could use all-electric or hybrid-electric propulsion systems capable of vertical takeoff and landing. The overarching goal of NASA's work in this space is to develop and validate tools, technologies, and concepts to overcome key challenges for vertical lift vehicles. A critical challenge for UAM market growth is public's acceptance that these vehicles can be as safe as commercial air travel or automotive transportation. However, the most immediate impact from NASA's work for the flying public is the reduction in cost through fuel burn improvements and lower airfare prices. To put that in context, let's look at some numbers. The overall global fleet of large commercial aircrafts totaled over 25,000 in 2017 and is expected to grow to 37,000 aircraft by 2027. Out of the 25,000 aircraft today, nearly 60% of those are narrow-body aircraft, small regional aircrafts, both jet and turboprops. Saving just 10% in fuel consumption across this fleet would yield more than 5 billion gallons of fuel savings per year, and is forecasted to save approximately 10 billion gallons by 2040. We also have to take into account the reduction into CO2 emissions. So how do we get there? The leading concept that NASA is currently investigating for partially turboelectric configuration is single-aisle turboelectric with IVE boundary layer propulsor known as Stark-Able. This configuration is being developed assuming entry into service by 2035. It consists of two underwing turbofans with generators extracting power from turbofan shafts and transmitting it electrically to rear fuselage boundary layer ingesting fan. One of the main sources of drag on an aircraft is a layer of slow-moving air that builds up along the fuselage and wings, known as boundary layer. Boundary layer creates extra drag, and we believe we can improve aircraft performance by embedding engines into the airframe and having those engines consume boundary layer air. By ingesting boundary layer, the drag is significantly decreased, which leads to an overall improvement in aircraft efficiency. Results indicate that this turboelectric concept has an economic fuel burn reduction of 7%, an emission fuel burn reduction of 12% comparing to other aircraft designs. Several years ago, NASA has developed an advanced and highly integrated concept known as N3X, which explored fuel savings by combining a blended wing body design with fully turboelectric and fully distributed propulsion system based on superconducting electric machines and power distribution. The fuel benefits of this configuration is very significant, estimated at nearly 70% reduction comparing to conventional aircrafts such as Boeing 777. This concept has the best benefits so far studied. However, it requires the most aggressive technology and infrastructure development. And last but not least, NASA is building its first ever all-electric X-plane, X-57 Maxwell. This design will demonstrate an effective interaction between the wing, the engine propellers, and the flight mission flight path, while simultaneously solving a number of challenging technical issues for electrified propulsion in crew-rated aircrafts. While electric motors are more efficient than fuel-burning engines, they produce a significant amount of heat during operation, requiring an integrated thermal management system to be incorporated into the design. Now, a common method of solving such heat-related problems is to employ an embedded heat sink or a large metal heat sink or water cooling system. But this can cause a dramatic increase in weight, thus reducing the benefit gained by electric conversion. One such research effort to control the heat generated by these systems was performed late last year by my team, where we developed a 98% efficient 13 kilowatt power system for X-57 high-lift propulsors. Weighing only 2 pounds and completely air-cooled, this system was fully qualified across various facilities at NASA Glenn in 10 short months. And within the next 2 years, our system will be flying on X-57 flights, proving that it is possible to have a lightweight, air-cooled solution for aircrafts. In order to qualify the components in this electrified era in aviation, NASA needed to develop capability to test and verify them before in-flight testing. So we converted our hypersonic test facility in Plumbrook Station in Sandusky to NASA Electrified Aircraft Testbed, NEAT. Currently, this state-of-the-art facility is being used to test full-scale megawatt powertrains with an eye towards incorporating component technologies into an overall system. The facility can support single-aisle aircraft geometries with proper cable lengths and electromagnetic interference mitigation. It can supply power for up to 24 megawatts, thermal management system for up to 2 megawatts, and it even contains an altitude chamber that can simulate up to 120,000 feet. All electric aircraft concepts that we've seen so far rely heavily on advancements of components such as advanced motors, power converters, and material science, to name a few. X-57 work is an example of much larger research portfolio within the field of power systems led by NASA Glenn. Over the past 20 years, Glenn has pioneered designs of various high power, density, and high efficient motors for space, aeronautics, medical, and terrestrial applications. All our work has always pushed the boundaries of what's possible, and our newest motor work is no different. NASA Glenn has a small in-house team that is developing a 1.4 megawatt motor with a performance goal of 16 kilowatts per kilogram and efficiency greater than 98%. The motor contains a self-cooled superconducting rotor, which has never been done before, allowing the motor to achieve exceptional specific power and efficiencies without inheriting external cooling weight penalty commonly attributed to superconducting machines. Integrated rotor superconductor, spinning at 6,800 RPM, 4 times higher than the state-of-the-art, and weighing only 80 kilograms. This motor revolutionizes the field of advanced motors and greatly increased number of aircraft concepts that can utilize hybrid architectures. All our electric motor work is all diverse in size, applications, and power levels. And it's beyond the world of aeronautics. Just 5 years ago, my team designed, built, and delivered a biconical motor to University of Indiana School of Medicine. This motor was designed to help catalyze advancements in the field of cardiovascular assist devices, such as pacemakers for kids who are born with a single heart ventricle. This motor is tiny in comparison to the ones on aircraft, just 2 inches tall, and is powered by a total of 5 watts, same power as USB ports on your computers. Currently, our design is being used to develop a clinical trial version, and hopefully a viable device will enter a market within a decade, saving an estimated 1,500 children per year. All great progress is accompanied with great difficulty. It must be enterprised and overcome with answerable courage. In our efforts, we don't underestimate the power of vision and direction. These are irresistible forces able to transform what might appear to be unconquerable obstacles into traversable pathways and expanding opportunities. I am deeply humbled to have an opportunity to be part of this amazing journey, a journey that will surely change the world. Thank you.
How do you get from here to Mars? How do you get from here to the moon? Probably more important to you, how do you get from here to your home? Well, to start, the answer to all three is very similar. You need to know where you are, you need to know where you're going, and you need a map that can connect the two. Now, in the case of going home, your map will have all of the roads between where you are and where your home is, so you can pick your path or your trajectory and drive your way home. In the case of going to Mars, or to the moon, or to any of the planets or planetary bodies where we've sent humans or robotic spacecraft to over the years, finding that path or that trajectory is proved all the more difficult because where you are and where you're going are always in motion, which leads me to orbits and trajectories and NASA's return to the moon. Merriam-Webster defines an orbit as the path described by one body in its revolution about another, like the Earth going around the sun, or in the case of this talk, a spacecraft going around a gravitational body or two. Now we enter the world of rocket science. Johannes Kepler, with the help from volumes and volumes of data on planetary motion captured by Tycho Brahe, calculated that the paths these orbits took in the presence of a gravitational field followed conic shapes like circles or nearly circular ellipses. And with this information, scientists figured out how to move an object, a spacecraft, from one orbit to another. One of the most famous of these scientists in orbital mechanics circles is Walter Hohmann, who created what became known as the Hohmann transfer. The Hohmann transfer, simply put, is an elliptical orbit that will allow you to transfer between two circular orbits of different radii in the same plane about the same central body. So remember when I asked you how you would get from here to Mars? Well, the Hohmann transfer from Earth to Mars, shown in this animation, would take you there. NASA's scientists and engineers have gotten really creative in creating trajectories to send robotic spacecraft around and beyond our solar system. But for humans, the farthest that we've gone is to our moon, 50 years ago. In Apollo 11, on July 16, 1969, 3 astronauts were launched on a Saturn V rocket, leading to humankind's first giant leap. After the first 3 Saturn engines burned, the Apollo spacecraft was placed into a low circular Earth parking orbit, roughly 100 nautical miles in altitude, or approximately the distance between Cleveland and Columbus. After final checkouts, the Saturn V burned what's called a translunar injection burn, or TLI, that placed them on the trajectory that would take them to the moon. There they would coast for 3 days before being captured by the moon's gravity into a low lunar orbit. Now, after they completed their surface mission, the astronauts returned to the waiting command module Columbia to start their trip home. The Columbia, like the translunar injection burn, burned a trans-Earth injection burn to place them on the trajectory back to Earth. Now, having traveled an average distance of 240,000 miles from the Earth to the moon, these Apollo missions still stand as the farthest that humans have ever gone from the surface of the Earth. And this is a significant distance. Given the diameter of the Earth, roughly 30 Earth-sized planets can fit between the Earth and the Moon. Now, since Apollo, the farthest we've sent humans is to the International Space Station, located in a low Earth orbit, roughly 400 kilometers from the surface of the Earth, or about 250 miles, or approximately the distance between Cleveland and Cincinnati. Now, because the International Space Station orbits so close to the Earth, the combined gravitational pull of the Earth, as well as the atmospheric drag on the station, means it's in a constant state of freefall and reentry. And periodically, visiting vehicles with propulsion systems will give the ISS a boost to keep it in its orbit. Now, with this spring's Artemis announcement, NASA has announced plans to return humans to the surface of the Moon, landing the first woman and the next man on its surface by 2024. The current Artemis plans are a blend of those Apollo lunar sortie campaigns as well as the ISS sustainability elements. And the first key sustaining piece of this Artemis program plan is the Gateway, to be assembled in orbit near the Moon. The Gateway is a mobile command and service module, and it will provide us with a place to aggregate and assemble the spacecraft that will land onto the Moon, as well as provide us with a communications relay to support robotic and human missions anywhere on the Moon's surface, but starting at the Moon's south pole. The first element of the Gateway is the power and propulsion element managed here in Cleveland at NASA Glenn Research Center and built in a public-private partnership with Maxar Technologies. Now, said our administrator, Jim Bridenstine of the PPE, it will be the key component upon which we will build our Lunar Gateway Outpost, the cornerstone of NASA's sustainable and reusable Artemis exploration architecture on and around the Moon. This power and propulsion element is a high-power, 50-kilowatt class solar electric propulsion spacecraft. And at that, it's roughly 3 times more powerful than current state-of-the-art technologies. Now, the Gateway with this PPE, with both power and propulsion, is capable of not only holding place in one orbit, but of transferring between orbits in support of the sustainable lunar architecture. Flying the PPE will provide us with invaluable experience for future missions to Mars. And the current plan is to launch the power and propulsion element in 2022. The Gateway will be assembled in a new type of orbit, perfectly balanced by the gravitational pulls of the Earth and the Moon, called a near rectilinear halo orbit, or NRHO, a family of which you can see in this animation. Now, when Apollo went to the Moon, the low lunar orbit in which the command module waited was so pulled by the Moon's gravity that it was not stable and would not have allowed for the spacecraft to stay for long. But the near rectilinear halo orbit, balancing as it does between the Earth and the Moon, and glowing yellow here, means that the power and propulsion element only need to perform small orbit maintenance maneuvers to stay permanently. The gravity will balance. Okay. The near rectilinear halo orbit is different than those circular orbits that I mentioned that Kepler discovered, like the orbit that the Moon takes around the Earth. These 3 views here show you that the near rectilinear halo orbit is an orbit about the Earth, but at the distance of the Moon, so it's tugged by the Moon. And these Earth-Moon interactions mean that for every 2 orbits that the Moon makes about the Earth, the spacecraft, the Gateway, in this near rectilinear halo orbit will make 9 of these leapfrogs over and under the Moon. And the period of this near rectilinear halo orbit, or the period between these leaps, is roughly 6.5 days, with only 4 hours out of that almost week spent out of view of the Moon's south pole. Now, if you view it from the Earth, the near rectilinear halo orbit looks like a long elliptical orbit about the Moon, or a halo, thus the name. And this one has its closest approach to the Moon at the Moon's north pole, and its farthest approach at the Moon's south pole. And as I said, this near rectilinear halo orbit is one of a large family, and it was designed specifically to provide for maximum lunar coverage of the South Pole, as well as to provide that a spacecraft in this orbit, the Gateway, stays in as much direct sunlight as possible. Now, near rectilinear halo orbits are very favorable for transferring into and out of, which is nice when your spacecraft is meant to be a staging area for exploration with other ships coming and going. And this trajectory animation shows the path that the Orion, with the crew in it, would take as they depart Earth, head toward a powered lunar flyby to put them into the Gateway in the NRHO, stay in the NRHO for 1.5 orbits before departing to head back to another powered lunar flyby to put them on the trajectory that would take them back home. Now, recall that the Gateway, with the power and propulsion element, is capable not just of holding place in one orbit, but also of transferring between orbits. The NASA Glenn Research Center Power and Propulsion Element Mission Design Team has designed several trajectories, taking the Gateway farther and farther from Earth to other orbits where mission scenarios and science can be completed. Flying these transfers will allow us to gain invaluable experience operating these types of large, human-tended systems in space, and along the lengthy transfers we're going to need to accomplish if we're going to be able to send humans to our closest neighbor, the red planet, Mars. Now, the current Artemis plans will take place in a two-phased approach, with the first focused on speed, landing on the moon by 2024, as we've discussed, and the second to establish a sustained lunar presence on and around the moon by 2028. Flying the Gateway and the power and propulsion element will allow us to accomplish both the first by giving us a place to aggregate and assemble the spacecraft that will land on the moon, as well as the second by providing us a place to refurbish and refuel the lunar elements for subsequent lunar missions or reorient to focus on other areas on and around the moon. The current plans for Artemis have several elements that are similar to Apollo. The years may change, but the physics remains the same. First, the crew is launched in the Orion spacecraft on a Space Launch System, or SLS, rocket, on a trajectory that will take them directly to the NRHO, which you've already seen. Once the Orion docks with the Gateway, the two crew members who will go to the surface transfer from the Orion into the waiting lunar lander system. Current concepts for the lunar lander system are composed of three parts. First, a transfer module, then an ascent module, and a descent module. The transfer module will take the entire stack and the crew to a low lunar parking orbit. From there, the descent module will take the ascent module with the crew down to the surface. When they've completed their mission, the ascent module will return the crew back to the Gateway. Current plans have lunar surface missions roughly 3 to 7 days, after which the astronauts will return to the Gateway, transfer back to the Orion, and make their way home. On July 20th, 1969, I was a toddler and on a boat on Lake Erie with my parents and some family friends. And my mother tells me I was interested in a drink of the pop that she was drinking. So when she handed me the glass and I placed it to my mouth, she heard a little clink sound. So I literally cut my first tooth the day that Neil Armstrong first stepped on the moon. And I am beyond excited about the prospect of returning people to its surface. My son and daughter have grown up with NASA as part of their family. And when they look up at the moon, they're excited to do something greater than what we did in Apollo. They're excited for Artemis, for the Artemis generation. And this time, with the help of the Gateway and the power and propulsion element, we plan to stay. And while we are there, we'll prepare for the greater adventure of sending people even further from Earth and on to Mars. And with that, I want to thank my husband and my children for allowing me to use a photo of them, all of the mission designers who made everything behind me possible, and the power and propulsion element and Gateway teams. Thank you very much.
We're going to the moon. This time we're going to stay. We're going to the moon as a proving ground for learning how to live and thrive on another planetary body in preparation for future missions to Mars. NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine uses one word repeatedly when describing how the Artemis program differs from the Apollo program.
The President's first space policy directive says to go to the moon, go sustainably, and have the United States of America lead a coalition of nations for a sustainable return to the moon. By 2028, we need sustainability. We're going to the moon, we're going sustainably, we're moving fast.
Sustainable. We also hear or see this or similar words in media postings from space entrepreneurs and international space agencies. Sustainable, reusable, resources. What does all this mean? Before I answer that, let's talk about what it doesn't mean. So far, in our 50-year history of sending humans beyond Earth orbit, we have brought everything we need for the trip from home. And the bulkiest and heaviest thing we need is the rocket propellant that gets us off Earth and safely back. When the Saturn V was sitting on the launch pad, we had big, powerful rocket engines at the bottom and a tiny human space capsule and lunar module at the top. In between is mostly propellant, oxygen and kerosene to get us off Earth, oxygen and hydrogen to push them to the moon, and storable propellants to get down to the lunar surface, back up to orbit, and back home. And while the propellants for the return trip seem small compared to the other stages, it can have a huge impact on the entire vehicle. Think of what happens to the gas mileage in the family minivan on a road trip when we start climbing the mountains. Or worse, when we start climbing the mountains carrying precious vacation gear. Imagine what would happen if the family minivan had to pull a tanker of gas over those mountains in order to refuel for the trip home. As amusing as this image is, because we all realize how unsustainable this method of vacationing would be, this is exactly how we have explored space, until now. So how are we going to change this paradigm? We are going to build a gas station on the moon for the astronauts to refuel their vehicle for the trip home. Of course, gas stations only dispense the gas, so we will also need the equipment to gather the raw resources and a refinery to process those resources into rocket propellant. We call this in situ resource utilization, or ISRU for short. Our ancestors called it living off the land. We estimate that we will need approximately 12 tons of oxygen and hydrogen propellant to refuel the lander, get it back up to lunar orbit so we can use it again on the next trip. If we can make that 12 tons on the lunar surface, we wouldn't need to bring it from Earth. While this sounds like a huge savings on its own, because lunar ascent is the last phase of the mission, any savings are like compounded interest, and that 12 tons needed at the end of our trip can add up to much larger savings. In the previous talk, you heard about some of the different parts of the trip to the moon. Let's follow that trip backwards, assuming we make just 1 kilogram of propellant on the lunar surface. In order to land that 1 kilogram from low lunar orbit, we need another 1 kilogram of propellant in tanks, which we also don't need to bring from Earth when making the 1 kilogram on the surface. Our savings are at 2 kilograms. Continuing backwards, we would need another ½ kilogram to get that 2 kilograms from Gateway down to low lunar orbit. So now we have saved 2.5 kilograms. And even with the very efficient slow road trip that is planned to get the uncrewed elements out to Gateway, we would still need more than 6 kilograms of propellant to get that 2.5 kilograms from low Earth orbit up to Gateway. Add it all together, that 1 kilogram we made on the lunar surface has reduced our mass in low Earth orbit by almost 9 kilograms, which means the ability to make 12 tons on the lunar surface can reduce our mass in low Earth orbit by over 100 tons. Also, because we can now reuse the lander, we realize an additional 18-ton savings in low Earth orbit because of all the propellant we don't need to push a new lander out to Gateway on every trip. Altogether, production of propellant to enable a reusable lander could result in 120 tons less at the start of our trip, a substantial reduction from the old way of exploring space. This saves significant launch costs and brings the vision of sustained presence on the lunar surface within our grasp. So let's talk now about some of the technology needed to make ISRU a reality. NASA plans to land near the South Pole, where orbital missions such as Clementine and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter detected water signatures in and near the permanently shadowed regions. and the plume created when the L-Cross spacecraft was purposely crashed into Cabeus crater contained hydrogen components equivalent to 5% water by weight. This data combined has painted a picture of significant water resources, shown here in blue, that can be harvested for life-sustaining water and air for the astronauts, as well as the tons of propellant for the trip home. The first step is to dig up the icy regolith and deliver it to a processing plant. But Newton's third law of motion says that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And the 1/6 gravity on the moon makes it difficult to find the reaction force necessary for digging and driving. So we are working on new ways of digging in compacted granular regolith and in hard materials, where we may take many small scoops instead of big scoops, push sideways against the wheels of the excavator instead of in line with them, or possibly dig at both ends to provide the reaction force. We are working on lightweight compliant wheels made of wires that remember their original shape to provide traction for our excavators. And we are designing mobility platforms with easily replaceable components for prolonged life when we are so far away from our favorite mechanic. Once we have gathered the resource, we will bake it to extract the water, possibly in something similar to a terrestrial soil dryer. Except on Earth, they are interested in the dry dirt. And on the Moon and Mars, we are interested in the water that comes out. So while all of this sounds simple enough, kind of, there are still many challenges to getting to this exciting natural resource and extracting the water for use. First, the water is in permanently shadowed regions, which are surrounded by sunlight, but remain in permanent shadow because they are lower than the surrounding terrain. Terrain maps of the area say that the path into these regions can be long and steep, with most slopes greater than 15 degrees, shown here in green, presenting significant challenges if we want to continually drive in to gather the resource and drive back out to deliver it to the processing plant. An alternative is to do more processing at the excavation site, baking the water out on a hot plate as we dig it up. Of course, this is also not as easy as it sounds, as we have discovered that the dirt flows over the plate much more quickly in a vacuum than in our initial open-air tests, and some of the simulants fall out of the scoop more easily than others, leaving big questions about how any of this will work in the real lunar environment. To avoid having to dig up the dirt altogether, we may take inspiration from the workings of a terrestrial Zamboni and create a lunar Zamboni that heats the dirt with microwaves and collects the evolving water as it rows through the shadows. Extracting the water inside the region and storing it in a tanker means fewer trips outside of the region, but more power inside, where that same lack of sunlight that's good for preserving the ice is bad when wanting to use solar energy. Therefore, processing inside the shadowed regions will likely require some sort of beamed energy or nuclear power, another technology being developed here at the NASA Glenn Research Center. In order to move toward our sustainability goal faster, we may start by processing the regolith outside the shadowed regions, where we still have plenty of sunlight for solar energy. The lunar regolith contains over 40% oxygen, bound up in a mix of minerals comprised of metal oxides, such as iron oxide and silicon oxide. By processing this regolith at high temperatures and adding in hydrogen, we can break the iron oxide bonds and extract the oxygen in the form of water. By going to even higher temperatures and introducing carbon in the form of methane gas, more of the metal oxide bonds can be broken to extract the oxygen. While production of oxygen alone from the regolith outside the shadowed regions does not get us all the way to our sustainability goals, 10 of that 12 tons of propellant I said we needed for the trip home is oxygen, so it is a good start. After establishing a foothold on the edge of the country, our pioneer ancestors began pushing westward. We can imagine, because we're a bunch of engineers, we actually did the math, what would have happened if their covered wagons filled with the possessions and tools needed to survive in the wilderness instead needed to carry the food, water, and air for the mules pulling the wagon. Assuming 6 mules can pull a 2,000-pound wagon 25 miles a day, and those same 6 mules require 85 pounds a day of food, water, and air, then our ancestors never would have made the Appalachian Mountains. There are many more parts we are working on to complete our combination mine, refinery, and gas station for the Moon and Mars. When we are done, we will have discovered, or perhaps rediscovered, a new and better way of exploring beyond the bounds of Earth. Thank you.
So what do you think? Pretty cool, huh? These guys did a great job. So thanks again to David, Melissa, and Diane. You guys did a wonderful job. It's nerve-wracking. I'm glad I'm not doing it. They did a wonderful job. These presentations were just a small glimpse of all the incredible research and development being conducted by our expert staff at the Glenn Research Center, all of whom are dedicated to powering the future of flight innovation and space exploration. So this will conclude tonight's program. Please join us for dessert in the reception area, and we invite you to engage with tonight's presenters, other subject matter experts who are also here tonight, and members of the Glenn's leadership team. There's also a special planetarium show that starts at 9:15, so if you're into planetarium shows, you will really enjoy that. So thank you once again for joining us here tonight at our Evening with the Stars, and we hope you have a very safe trip home. Thank you very much for coming. Good night.